You're listening to BQN. Assimilate the audio.
Welcome, listeners, to another episode of All Good Things, a Star Trek Universe podcast here on BQN and the Fandom Podcast Network. I'm your host, Christos, and with me today are Kelvin and Mark. Happy Sunday, gentlemen.
Happy Sunday.
Happy Sunday, which is strange that we say that considering the listeners will be listening on a Thursday, but happy Sunday anyway. Happy Thanksgiving week approaching for you guys.
Yeah, it doesn't even feel like Sunday. I'm off for a nice extended 9 days here, so I'm just kind of in my own little temporal vortex of, space and time mean nothing to me.
It's interesting living so close to Plymouth, Massachusetts, and like Plymouth Rock, and like where the Mayflower landed, and all the first Thanksgiving. I've never been to Plymouth, and I could probably drive there within like 30 minutes. I've never been, so I've got to check that out.
It's funny. I watch The Gilded Age, and Christine Baranski kind of serves as the Maggie Smith of this show. She's the love. She is. But she made a joke in a recent episode. They're talking to everyone, and it talks about it was a thing in the 1800s to be able to say, my family was on the Mayflower. My time in the New World goes back that far. You know what I mean? And everyone claims they were on the Mayflower. For every person that's on the Mayflower, that should have been Noah's Ark or something. She made some sort of joke like that boat had to have been huge because of all these people that claim that they can trace their lineage back to having come over on the original Mayflower. So just a little completely non-Star Trek related thing, except for our Donna Murphy reference, of course.
Has there been a USS Mayflower? I guess I should know the answer to that, really.
I don't know. But I did see my comments about Gates McFadden being really good for this show got echoed by Crusher Convo, and we're getting some chatter online. So that's kind of cool.
Nice
Maybe we'll see a reuniting of Anuj and Beverly. Just will it. We'll manifest it.
Sir, it's wonderful. A feeling of great joy and gratitude. Great joy and gratitude.
Continuing our new feature of Great Joy and Gratitude is where we give a shout out to the Trek moment of the week. And that's our personal Trek moments of the week. Those moments that brought us great joy and gratitude. So, Kelvin, what got you excited in the world of Star Trek this week?
Oh, I'm being very, very consumer here. And it's a new piece of merchandise. So Insight Editions, which are a company who I don't really know too much about, they've released a new advent calendar for Christmas this year, which is a lovely little, I believe it's the original series Shuttlecraft Galileo, I think. Might be a next gen, can't remember. But I've ordered it, and it's an advent calendar with different small pieces of merchandise in every day, I guess. Now, I had the Borg Cube advent calendar that was 2 or 3 years ago. And I think this is the first one they've done since that. A lot of people didn't really rate the advent calendar. They said it was all just a load of tat inside, really cheap rubbish. I loved it. I thought it was great. So I was really happy. I hope James isn't listening to this podcast, actually, because it is a little surprise that I bought for him. So I may have just ruined that. But yeah, when it comes in the mail ahead of December the 1st, in a couple of weeks' time, we'll have some new merch. So I'm very excited about that. That's my piece for the week.
So that's your way to find out if he really does listen.
Yeah. He said he only listens to the episodes that Amy's on, so I think we're safe.
Oh, wow.
I know. Savage.
I'm going to have some words with him.
Uh-huh.
All right. Mark, what's got you going today?
Well, we just covered, and this is Trek related, a roundabout way. We just covered a Dune episode in my Cinema Z podcast where we talk films, and we covered like all of the Dune movies and some of the book and what have you. And part of Cinema Z is we reenact moments from the films, but we play along and play out scenes. And listeners, it's worth it to tune in to that episode strictly just to hear Matthew Jennings do his Patrick Stewart impersonation when he was in Dune, and it is so funny. He does such a good Sir Patrick because he tried to channel Brent Spiner's. So his impersonation is based on Brent Spiner's impersonation of Sir Patrick Stewart, and it is to die for. So check that episode out.
All right, so I'm going to give two quick ones. Well, one quick one and one maybe a little bit longer. First off, we've confirmed that Strange New World starts filming on December 10th already. They're going to make those actors work through Christmas, it sounds like. So they're getting the show right back to production. They truly did have a plan I know they had said they were working every month when the month reset and the strike was still going on. They're like, well, what happens if the strike finishes this month? And so they would redo all their plans. And so apparently that did work. And they have started up pre-production, I heard, on Section 31 this week too. So it should be filming imminently.
When do you guys think she's going to pop out? Do you think I hope she pops out in TNG time. That'd be so cool.
I know, right? I mean, that's going to be the big, what timeline does she come into? And where does it make sense, Mark? I guess if you really look at it, this could be a financial thing. Like, what do they have the sets for? You know,
she better not pop out in 2023. I will freak.
I think Star Trek needs to leave current day adventures alone for a very long time. I know financially it makes sense, but yeah.
Well, we could manifest that if Academy is in future Discovery and everyone's pissed off that Picard season 3, unless we get Legacy, is done, I would like Michelle Yeoh to appear in kind of Picard season 3, and she could pick up with Bashir, and Bashir could be in Section 31 with her, and I think that would be fabulous.
Oh yeah, Kelvin. That'd be great.
That would be really cool. My other little bit of news is there's been some worry over the last year or so that Star Trek novels are losing steam. And I think this year was the amount, we have not seen as few Star Trek novels released since 1980 in 2023 versus 1980. In between the years, we've always had a plethora of Star Trek novels. Well, next year, we already know of 3 novels that are due, including Firewall, which is a Picard novel that will deal with Seven of Nine's journey right after Voyager returns back from the Delta Quadrant and kind of explains to us how she gets to the Fenris Rangers. So, and they announced 2 others this week. One is called Lost to Eternity, which will be it's a TOS movie era novel. It takes place actually in 3 timelines. I believe actually current day, during the Enterprise's original 5-year mission, and in the time after Undiscovered Country. But I believe we see characters like Gillian Taylor and Savick return in this novel. So it should be really fun for all the movie fans to see those characters back. And I think the one I'm most excited about is called Pliable Truce. It is a TNG novel, kind of a TS9 crossover, and it deals with the Cardassian exiting Bajor. It's literally right before DS9 starts, and it's still Tarek Noor, but the Enterprise goes to help mediate the evacuation a little bit, and Ensign Rowe is supposed to be in this novel, and it looks like from the cover, Garrick is in this novel. So yeah, we get to see a little bit of a prequel to DS9.
You know, James is a prolific reader of all the Star Trek novels. I saw the image of the cover of the one with Savick on, and I thought of you instantly. I thought, oh, Christos is going to love this.
Yeah, and our very own Jason Anderson had to like take a stab at me online to say it's the better Savick because it is the images of the Robin Curtis Savick, not Kirstie Alley. I'm fine, especially if you're going to play her later. So, Kelvin, would you like to introduce our topic?
I would. You know what? It's been that long since we've done a Man versus Machine episode. I thought, why don't we do another one? So long. Like it was only last week. So we're on part 7, Man versus Machine, which, if you recall, was supposed to be last week's episode. We are going to be looking at the Doomsday Machine from the original series, season 2, episode 6. Previously covered, we've had The Ultimate Computer from the original series, Nth Degree from TNG, Enterprise Dead Stop, Project Daedalus from Discovery, and Where Pleasant Fountains Lie from Lower Decks, and last week's episode, Bar Association from DS9.
Mark, do you want to give us a synopsis?
Do I? All right. So, in this episode, the Enterprise discovers a weapon capable of destroying entire planets, and Starfleet flag officer, whose crew was killed by the machine, jeopardizes the crew on a crazed mission of revenge. There we go.
Thank you very much, Memory Alpha, for that awesome synopsis. It's kind of right. It's very basic. I always love sometimes when you read these basic synopsis and it's like, oh, you got it all down in the 2 sentences. You know, a 50-minute screenplay, right? And it's not too far off. So, initial thoughts. What do we think of this episode, Mark?
Well, this ranks up among one of the best TOS episodes. I mean, it's an absolute classic. I mean, people quote this all the time. It's very memorable. You have that weird planet-killing machine. There's a lot of great Scotty moments in this with ingenuity. We have Transporter Chief Kyle makes an appearance in this too, who is in Strange New Worlds. There's a lot going on here. Some great acting. The guy that plays Decker, he just gets to the point of being over the top, but doesn't go full on. He gets right up to the line, I feel like, but doesn't overdo it. Like it's crazy, but not too crazy. I thought he could. I
may disagree with that, but we have a whole topic about that, so we'll revisit that a little deeper here in a minute. Kelvin, what do you think about this episode?
Yeah, I'm with Mark. I like this episode. I think this is a good original series episode for Next Generation fans to watch if they find some of the older aspects of Star Trek a bit jarring in the way kind of they portray Starfleet. I think it's aged very well. There's nothing like really distasteful in it where you think it's been kind of retconned later in Next Generation DS9 and so on. So
there's no people in bunny suits here.
Exactly. There's a lot. It's a really good story. It deals with some good themes. It's not perfect. You know, Uhura's not in it for a start.
Oh, I know.
Uhura's day off and all.
The first thing I noticed about that.
Yeah, but I mean, it could have literally been Nichelle. They just lifted and shifted to a different actress. But yeah, love it. It is one of the more pleasant. If I do a rewatch of the original series, I will undoubtedly skip a number of episodes. This isn't one that I do. I really like it. Also, as well, do you recall? Now, I'm asking you. We've already been talking about our failing memories today. Cast your mind back to the pandemic. And the three of us here, plus some of the dear friends, we would do our Sunday night Zooms. And we originally started doing them to do episode rewatches together. And this was the episode that we chose first. So a group of us all got on and it was quite serious and we were watching the episode. And then as we had a drink, it descended into silliness. And then every subsequent week, it's like, well, let's just not do an episode rewatch. Let's just get get drunk and have a chat with each other. So this episode is quite special because it makes me think of you guys and all our friends, that all those weeks that we spent in the pandemic.
Now, see, now you have no, I like that. I like that. I do remember, of course, all that. I don't remember this being the first episode or whatnot. I don't think we spent much time doing that. Those talks quickly descended into just talking.
It was 2 weeks. We did this episode and we did TNG
the first
Conspiracy.
Yeah.
And then that was it. Once people started doing impressions and telling jokes, and the episodes kind of got lost.
As we can see, Kelvin's memory is much better than mine. I will say I did have some red wine as I watched this last night. It's the only way I can handle Commodore Decker. So this is, I agree, it's one of the biggest or most known TOS episodes. It's definitely one that I've probably seen almost the most. There's a few others. But, I like the episode overall. Definitely after actually researching this episode to put some of the trivia and whatnot together, it kind of informed what I was feeling a little bit. There's parts of this episode that have some flaws, but let's just say anything does. But overall, I have a positive outlook on the episode. But we'll dive into it. Topic 1 is the indestructible machine, which we see as a trope that often turns up in sci-fi. Right, computer gone crazy, which is this whole series that we actually cover here in on All Good Things. But so, what do we think about the Doomsday device?
What I was reminded of is that planet in TNG where they went down and they had the Arsenal. Was it the Arsenal of Freedom? Oh my God, I remember the title. This is shocking, listeners.
I bet you can't remember the name of the computer system.
Oh God, no! But I'm shocked I remember the title of the episode. But anyway, they go down and it's the same kind of idea where both sides got destroyed because they had created this machine. Oh, we should cover that on this series.
I was going to say, I think you just got part 8 figured out for us.
Both sides of the war got destroyed because this one side created this mechanism that's just going to kill pretty much everything that moves. And so it kind of reminded me of that a little bit. And I like that idea because it is a commentary on, I guess, where culture was at in the 60s and like the atom bomb and like, okay, we're going to annihilate ourselves as a species if we don't slow down on building all these giant weapons of mass destruction. So I think that's cool. I think it's a cool concept.
I find it quite interesting that you went there straight away with that, because to me that's one of the downsides of the story, that it was almost the science was taken away from the episode, in that this was pure action, and obviously it dealt with a lot of survivor guilt, mental health issues with Decker, but it had this. Imagine, Beverly Crusher being in this episode. She would have wanted to find the builders, find out who they were, what happened to them, a little bit more backstory into the culture that made this device, rather than it just being this thing that wandered the galaxy, destroying solar systems. So it almost seemed like action for action's sake, rather than there being stakes to it and it mattering more.
It's funny you mentioned Beverly Crusher, because I will invoke her in saying that she would have had this guy removed a lot sooner than McCoy.
Yeah,
she would have recognized. She would have recognized that he was unfit for duty and not been afraid to invoke that. But that's all hypothetical, of course. But yeah, I just feel like that's part of the. When I do talk about the failings of this episode, that was one of them for me. And I know we're kind of jumping ahead to talking about the Commodore, but
What do you think of the design of the Planet Killer? Because clearly it's well established that it's a machine straight away, but it almost looked quite organic in the way that it was like a worm. It was almost seemed like a space-dwelling organism rather than a constructed machine.
It's funny you say worm, because it does look like the sandworms in Dune.
It does. And it reminds me of things like the probe in Star Trek 4 and things like that, where it's like, it could be, is it alive? Is it organic? Or is it a machine? It definitely looks more organic, like spacefaring alien.
I think I just mentioned earlier, actually, I play Star Trek Timelines, which is an iOS game on my phone. And they added a new feature, which is you work in fleets with other players and you have to destroy the planet killer. So if you invest a lot in the game and you've leveled up a lot, clearly you're a lot stronger. So you have to find a fleet with people who are also as strong, and then you take on the planet killer. And it's really frustrating for me because they have easy, normal, hard, extra, etc. And I'm just at a point with it where I can't proceed any further because I hope no one's listening who's a member of my fleet, but nobody's strong enough to help us take it out. So I hate the planet killer.
It reminds me of those little bugle like corn chips that you put at the end of your fingers. And you got to put one on each of the fingers, and then you eat them individually, like a
witch, like your witch fingers.
Oh yeah, you pretend they're nails. I love that.
Yeah. Well, I like the idea of the indestructible machine. I think what we're all kind of articulating here is that we don't ever learn enough about it, and there needed to be either a follow-up episode, or B, there needed to be a little bit more exposition into it. But they do kind of set it up as this. It's taking out entire solar systems, including suns. So,
but it's only a little bit bigger than the starship. So I found that a little. I mean, I could see it eating an asteroid, but no. If you put that thing next to a planet, the planet's going to dwarf it. So does it just keep munching until it punches a hole through it? I don't know.
Who knows? Well, we didn't see it, did we? There was they couldn't afford the VFX to do it. But I mean, imagine if the budget was bigger for location shoots. There would have been an away team on that. We would have been looking inside of the damn thing. It's just we could have made it better.
Yeah, it's definitely a bottle episode in that respect. I mean, the sets that we see on the Constellation are just redressed Enterprise sets. So this was a low budget show for sure. Whatever they, and it's funny. I've only seen I can't tell you the last time I saw it with the original special effects. The newer special effects were done in the 2000s, and that's how I watch it now. And whenever I have to watch a TOS episode, so I haven't even gone back to see what the original version of that looks like. The Crazy Commodore is pretty much the focus of this episode. Commodore Matt Decker. Yes, we show up. The Constellation is adrift. They beam an away team over, and they basically find this super traumatized Commodore, who why they didn't beam him directly to sick bay and start this guy, on psychiatric treatment is beyond me, but we didn't. Because television, we have to have some. It's got to make sense dramatically. We can't solve our problem just like that. But eventually, we find this guy to be quickly. He's Captain Ahab. It's Moby Dick, which is a trope we see a lot in Star Trek. But he commandeers the Enterprise because I believe the transporters prevent Kirk from coming back over, and he can even if Kirk had been on the Enterprise, he still could have pulled the rank move that he did. Although, Kirk kind of pushes a mutiny toward the end, I guess, technically. I don't know. What do we think about our Crazy Commodore?
I liked the actor. I don't know. Like I said at the beginning, I felt like he played him crazy. And I felt like he did go to the edge of, okay, you're overacting, but I don't think he crossed the line, in my opinion. But yeah, I enjoyed his performance overall. I've seen some flat acting on TOS where it's just like, okay, this person did like a shampoo commercial the week before and now they're on. But then there's this guy who really did act. So I appreciate that it wasn't flat.
I'll give you that. Yeah, he's definitely not flat. I likened his performance at crazy almost like he was playing a drunk as well. I mean, the whole that's the kind of way, it kind of came across, especially with, they actually went as far as letting the guy have some scruff because he's been out in space for a while. I mean, that's actually a really nice touch to show that he's not in his right mind, and that he's delusional. But yeah.
When it was done too far is when they were on that planet. Well, it was the episode. I'm doing so good today. The episode of TOS called Away Mission. And they're on that planet, and they see the Alice in Wonderland or whatever, and then they see okay, now I can't remember the character's name, but it was like Kirk's schoolhood friend, Finnegan. Now that guy was camp to the next level. That dude took it to 1,000 and was distractingly bad. So thank goodness we didn't get a repeat of that.
Sorry, Mark. The episode was called Shore Leave.
I was close. Shore Leave, Away Mission, whatever. Thank you. I will take my half point. I was at least on the same page.
Yeah.
Data insufficient.
Data insufficient. I love
that.
There's two things about Decker in these like disheveled performance that stood out. There was when you first see him and he's at the desk and he's supposed to be depicting someone in shock, but he just kind of has the most bewildered look on his face. And I guess it was quite hard to articulate that in the 60s. We're a lot better talking about mental health now and PTSD and things like that. And it's a lot wider understood. So that was the initial reaction to him. I just thought this is going to be bad and overplayed. But as the episode went on, he functioned a lot more. But also as well, something that really stuck, and I think this is a lot of still imagery, if you did like a Google search on the character, he sits in the captain's chair really weird. Like he's not fully in the chair. He sits on the side and he's kind of like holding. I mean, this means nothing to the listeners because I'm acting it out now, but he's like holding the back of the chair and he's holding the data discs really straight.
Like he kind of reminds me of like a villain in an 80s like teen movie where he's driving the sports car and his arms hanging out the window and the wind's through his hair and he's got like the aviator sunglasses. He's just like kind of a dick. It's kind of that, but in the captain's chair.
Yeah. I think it just dawned on me why I don't care for it. I think I think we're supposed to have empathy for him that he has been through something and he's not right, but it just comes off as a villain. That's a really good point. He comes off as a villain instead of somebody who I should have sympathy for because he's so traumatized and he's, just deranged. And I just almost look at him as like what they need to beat him now too, on top of the Doomsday Machine.
And the quite disparate states, really, when you think of someone who's in such shock that they're almost catatonic because they're kind of processing it, to someone who then goes to being highly functional, obsessed behavior. I'm in charge. We're going to battle the planet killer, even though we'll probably get destroyed. I don't care. I just want to do damage. They're very different states of mind, those, and to go from one to the other is very strange.
Yeah, and I know Spock was kind of playing the end game here, but in the meantime, I know Spock's letting it all play out and letting him hang himself, so to speak, right? When he'll do something so illogical that then Spock can do things above board or whatnot. But I still argue that they could have relieved him for medical, or McCoy could have definitely said, no, you need to come have a medical evaluation before we'll let you be in command, where you've been through too much. That's the parts where I was thinking Beverly, like in TNG, it would have been handled differently. But I think maybe your point, Kelvin, about this was done in the 60s and we knew so much less and people would probably not, have challenged that way. So there's it's this whole point of, where we're in the 60s, but we're trying to act like we're 300 years in the future. This will come up later on, folks, in my regeneration. That becomes a trope of why maybe some of this doesn't look right to us in 2023 looking back, because we've evolved so much as a society in how we look at somebody who's traumatized. Whereas back then, man, we probably swept it under the rug and just kept on going. And if you could keep on going and it would be probably looked at as manly, or you look at you're known right back at your desk, right back at your when people don't take the time to process, but that you were probably rewarded for how fast you could suck it up and get back to work.
Yeah. I did take an issue with his command decision to beam his crew down to the planet while they're dealing with the planet killer. I thought, surely there's another option. Maybe, consider the escape pods or something. Yeah, really, not really Command School 101, that one.
Yeah. I mean, there's also other things that we know. I mean, this often comes up wrongly in Star Trek, but even those older Constitution vessels could separate the saucer. You just had to go back to you just had to go back to a starred base to put it back together. So you could have done that, and I don't know, just me thinking outside the budget as usual. I always say that
officers to do a court martial, because we'd just be querying, why did you make that decision?
Well, it's like when you watch TNG so many times, it's like, how many times would a saucer separation have solved the problem? And of course they didn't do it. It becomes sometimes we become critics of having watched so many episodes of Star Trek, especially so many times, and knowing so much about the universe, that we're like, no, this episode would be over in the first act because we would have done XYZ and solved the problem.
We need the power from the saucer's impulse engines. We can't separate.
Okay, Riker. All right, so let's go into assimilations and regenerations. It's kind of funny. This is really kind of become my favorite part of our episodes, is when we do this part. It's how this is started off as just a little thing, but it's the part I look forward to the most, because I think we can be, it's kind of the ups and downs, right?
All right. I also like that we often have opposing views as well. There's been times where someone's listed something as a regeneration, and I've come on and said, no, I love that.
The remastered effects for external shots in the Planet Killer look pretty cool. I would agree with that. I do remember when these in America, I don't know about you guys, Kelvin, for you, but in America, these started airing on television around 2006 when they were working on these episodes, and they before they were available on home video in any way, sense, or form, and before we even had streaming platforms, these actually started airing one per week as a new episode on the weekend. And that's where I started watching these remastered. And it was, aside from having seen the classic Enterprise show up in Enterprise in the Mirror Universe episode, I remember being really blown away at seeing the TOS Enterprise looking that great on television when these started airing in 2006.
Yeah. It was a very similar time for us, and a lot of the 1,000,001 cable channels that you get these days, there's about 5 channels that show Star Trek every weeknight, and they're all in slightly different hour, like one's at 4, one's at 5, one's at 6, one's at 7. So, and they all use the remastered originals when they're using them, and they have done for years and years. So I can barely remember what the original shots look like. It's just the actual beauty of these, and the Planet Killer itself was just so textured, kind of like the body, if that's the hull, I guess. It just looked really good, and the scenes where the Enterprise is flying through at the beginning, you've got the debris from all the planets, that looked really good as well. So good job to whoever's job it was to clean all of this up. It's because even the remasters are still quite old now, so they've stood the test of time. Yeah. The de-aging has aged well.
I don't know if they'll end up redoing these or not, but I just liked that this came the year after Enterprise was canceled. So we kind of had these, and then we had the 2009 movie, and then of course the big project of the TNG remasters to high definition and Blu-ray and whatnot. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that kept Star Trek alive through those years before Discovery, and we only had 3 Kelvin movies that were over the course of those 11 or 12 years between what I guess the Berman era and the Discovery era.
An assimilation that I've got for this episode is it's classic Picard, listen to me, classic McCoy and Spock in the way when McCoy is desperate for Spock to take back command and demonstrate that he's not fit for command. Spock just goes along with it. You know, he's saying no, he's quoting the correct regulations, that he's a superior officer and he's allowed to take charge. And you can see McCoy is so frustrated with Spock for, you know, had that been Kirk would have started a mutiny. He would have just said, no, you're not having it. I don't care if we've scanned you or not yet. But Spock just goes along. And in hindsight, you can't help but think of the 2009 movie when Spock is emotionally compromised from the destruction of Vulcan, that they then throw regulation 619, I think it is, at him, saying you are emotionally compromised, so you have to relinquish command. Clearly, they didn't have that in the 60s, even though it's the same time frame.
They have a very Blanche and Dorothy relationship, and I love that.
True. That's the part, though, Kelvin, for what you were saying. Blanche and Dorothy, I love that. That's where Beverly would have. That's what it would have been different had this been 20 years later. He would have been, you know, there would have been no back and forth there. Kind of jumping back on it, because I don't see anybody else drop this into any of the assimilations. I do also love that we get the classic, I'm a doctor, not a mechanic.
Yeah.
In this episode, we get one of those tropey McCoyisms that, you know, that have almost been, you know, more that the reputation they have exceeds how many times they were used.
It's not a trope. It's iconic.
There you go. Yeah. It's not tropey. It's iconic. Oh, no, I love it. I love it. I mean, that would get made fun of in all the, you know, Saturday Night Live skits and other things that followed. I'm a doctor, not a, oh, wait a minute.
I took note here when they first beamed onto the constellation, and Kirk mentioned, he's like, oh, there's no clutter, no half-empty cups of coffee. And in my head, I know I put it in assimilations, and I did because I liked it. That's why it's an assimilation. But it also is kind of a regeneration, because, like, what starship are you going on where, you know, you just walk into the engine room and you're going to find half-consumed cups of coffee sitting around? I do love that he implies that his staff is sitting around drinking coffee. That's cool. There's coffee in that nebula. But no, I just found that weird, because no, there's not going to be clutter everywhere. What are you talking about?
Well, that's actually a perfect segue to my first regeneration, Mark, because things like that, there's no half-empty cups of coffee. Scotty, you just earned your pay for the week. And the mention of, or the allegory to the hydrogen bomb in the 20th century, it's all, for me, those are all things that take you out of it. That's all things that make you forget that you're 300 years in the future. It's writing to current times and modern times, and which was the late 1960s, and not writing to the future moment. And that's when Star Trek gets it wrong, I think, when they use current lingo, current observations, like, they haven't, you just earned your pay for the week. When, I think, you know, when money's been gone for a long time at this point, you know, these guys probably didn't even grow up in an age where you needed money, let alone would make that reference to a paycheck or mention to the hydrogen bomb. And I guess that's supposed to be your big lesson, right? The hydrogen bomb and doomsday machines and devices that weren't meant to be used. I mean, that's the Gene Roddenberry narrative of looking at society now through society in the future. But I think for me, it's a little bit too nail on the head, as they say. I don't know.
In Star Trek, they do it a lot where they are referencing 20th century matters in a list, but then they will throw an example into the list of something that hasn't happened yet for us. So they might be talking about a person and say, what if this person is the next Adolf Hitler or Khan Singh or John Smith? You know, it's someone that we don't know yet. So they're trying to rectify that situation you've just said, Christos, of not making it too much 20th century reference. But that has become so well, who are these people that you're talking about? So they can't get it right for getting it wrong. I have a regeneration, and you know what I'm like for canon and continuity. It just really bugged me that the away team, when they beamed down, were established to be an engineering team. Yeah, most of them were wearing command and science uniforms, but yet they were all Scotty's engineering team. It's like, well, did they just think what pretty looking uniforms? We need an array of colors. It's, well, no, they should all be in red. Get it right.
Yeah.
Oh, good call out.
Speaking of that away team as well, now I must hold my hands up here. I may have glanced at the phone and taken myself out. I don't recall that away team making it back to the Enterprise. Obviously, McCoy being back with Decker, and then Kirk was there till the end with Scotty. When did these away teams return?
He tells them to beam everybody over, but I can't remember if it actually happened. I know it's
I only saw Scotty come back.
Oh, they definitely should have been in red shirts then.
Yeah, exactly. More of a reason.
My regeneration for this episode, well, I think it was touched on by both of you guys and maybe myself earlier on in the discussion, but Decker was clearly a nutcase. How Spock ever let him in command is beyond me. Spock, we know Spock, he's intelligent, like clearly the guy is nuts. So why would he, and after all the stuff he's been through, why would Spock just anyway, so that's just a regeneration for me. It shouldn't have happened. Come on, Spock.
Wasn't it funny when they said, can you not deem him medically unfit? And he was like, well, I've not examined him. So, get your bloody tricorder out.
I mean, he has eyes.
Yeah.
Bev would have done it. You guys probably didn't know what to do with this one of mine here. I put that shuttlecraft bay door, but once again, Captain, we have an unscheduled launch from the shuttle bay. Someone just goes down to the shuttle bay, takes the shuttle, launches, leaves. It's no problem. You don't need any code. How many times you see that happen in Star Trek, especially on TNG? Yeah. In Voyager,
at least 47.
At least 47.
Well, question for you, Christos. I'd be interested to see, because we haven't seen it yet, but the TOS Enterprise, but in Strange New Worlds, like the Strange New Worlds Enterprise, we haven't been to the shuttle bay yet. Do you think they're going to make it look like the remastered version that we've seen here? Or do you think it's going to be Discovery'd, where it's going to be like 6 football fields long? What do you think?
I hope they, for the sake of fans not losing their heads, that they make it as much like the original they can. But, you're right. We've seen engineering. We've seen cargo bays several times, I think, on Strange New Worlds. But I don't think we've seen shuttles for sure. And even the shuttles are a little bigger, right, than the old TOS episode?
A little bit, yeah.
A little bit, but we have not actually been to the shuttle base. So let's put that down as a hope for season 3 wish list, because I like the shuttle base when they do scenes down there. I know they're extremely hard because you have to build those life-size shuttles from the outside.
Yeah.
One last little regeneration from me, and this is me with my gatekeeper hat on. I hated that they used the torpedo sound effects for when the phasers were firing. It's, come on, that's so basic.
Well, and it's like, and this is maybe somebody, listeners, if you know this, is that something that they purposely carried over from when they did the remaster because it was wrong in the original, or did they mess it up in the remaster, or is it something they should have just fixed in the remaster? Let's segue on into trivia. Kelvin, why don't you get us started?
Okay, so James Doohan, Scotty, named this as his favorite episode for highlighting of the engineering aspects of the Star Trek world. That's so typical. Oh, I love this episode because it's got lots of me in it.
Yeah.
Oh, Lord.
It's like Gates McFadden saying, "Remember me with my favorite," because it's the me show.
Oh, we're all as vain as each other.
Writer Norman Spinrad, right? Spinrad, Norman Spinrad.
There we go.
Norman.
I'll go with that.
Norman. Oh, Norman. Writer Norman Spinrad recycled a short story of his called The Planet Eater, which had been roundly rejected by publishing houses despite being heavily influenced by Moby Dick. He was able to convince Gene Roddenberry that it would make a viable subject for an episode, and it did. So cool. And it ends up being one of the best of the TOS episodes. So cool.
Oh. Well, here's a little bit of juicy gossip. William Wyndham didn't enjoy working on the show. He said that William Shatner and Leonard Nimoy weren't getting along at the time, which made the set's atmosphere tense. Oh.
Ooh, the library is open.
William Shatner. So Leonard Nimoy used to come to set on a bicycle. He used to ride his bike to work often. And William Shatner had a habit of taking the bicycle and hiding it around the set. Well, one time he took the bicycle and he literally strung it up into the rafters. So when Leonard Nimoy was ready to go home, he had to fish his bike down from the rafters and like the lights and stuff, and was pretty pissed. So I guess Shatner used to just do a lot of practical jokes that pissed off a lot of people.
Well, I mean, when it gets to the point that it's tense for the guest actors, I guess, that's borderline unprofessional, right? When you're not making your home hospitable for your guests, because you're having a tiff. I don't know. It's kind of, I will go out on a limb, and this is just my observation, listeners. I don't have the best view of William Shatner overall, holistically, through, much of the things that have been said about him by other actors, by the way he treats other people, by the way I've seen him behave on the Star Trek cruise and other places in person. I just don't have the highest. I love Captain Kirk, but I'm not saying I like William Shatner. Just saying. All right. Kelvin.
So, some sources hold that the episode was influenced by Fred Saberhagen's series of Berserker stories about a series of robotic killing machines built as a doomsday device by a now vanished race to wipe out their rivals. However, author Norman Spinrad denies the influence. Well, he would, wouldn't he? Yeah, I just copied it.
Yeah, I didn't plagiarize that,
Guilty.
No, nothing to see here.
Yeah, brand new information.
Although the episode usually places very highly in fan polls and best of lists, certain members of the production staff were and are a good deal less enthused. Writer Norman Spinrad disliked the end result. Complaining about the casting, he wanted Robert Ryan for Decker, and the underwhelming depiction of the Planet Killer, which he envisioned as having been bristling with weapons. In an interview for the Archive of American Television, Dorothy D.C. Fontana actually named it as her least favorite episode. Oh, no! Say it ain't so!
I know. That's a lot there. There's a lot to unpack with this one. First off, just the fact that the writer probably envisioned this to be more mechanical and having weapons, and whereas as we discussed, we got something that could have been maybe even organic as what was portrayed on screen. The writer not liking the acting of Decker and basically wanted somebody else. I mean, there's a lot here.
Thinking about his description and wanting there to be weapons all along the side of the thing and what have you, kind of reminded me of the Strange New Worlds episode from season 1, where they had that race that was following the comet, right? And it was the comet was the Mahanit, but I can never remember what the species was. Anyway, whatever. But their giant ship, it was a multi-generational ship, was had guns to the nines. So yeah, it reminded me of that ship.
Huh. Yeah, that probably would have been a better Doomsday machine. I don't know. This was one of several episodes produced using only pre-existing sets in an effort to save money. So it's kind of interesting that even by episode 6 of season 2, they were They were trying to save a little. Usually it's toward the end of a season that you're out of money, and then you're really trying to cut production costs down.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the good things about the original series, that they only really had the Constitution class ships. So anytime they needed to encounter another Starfleet ship, you could just use the existing sets. So am I right in thinking that the Reliant in Wrath of Khan was the first other class of starship that we saw that wasn't Constitution?
The first time we saw something in canon in the R timeline, yes,
Yeah.
1982 was the first time we saw another starship design.
Crazy. Okay, so we have the air pressure measured was in pounds per square inch above the constellation, whereas these days we would have said kilopascal. kPa is the preferred units of measurements. I didn't even notice that, and I don't know, maybe I'm aging myself here, that I've never heard pressure referred to in pounds per square inch. That's we have a very strange relationship here with measurements of, we say, oh, we've gone metric, but loads of things are not. We still work in miles rather than kilometers. A lot of things are measured in pounds and stone rather than kilograms. But I've never heard that unit of measurement, pounds per square inch. Interesting. Oh, actually, do you know what I have? That's what you do your tire pressure for on your car, PSI. There we go. I'm useless with cars, but I've learned something.
Oh my goodness. Kelvin just had an epiphany on air, listeners.
I've had a physics lesson spontaneously. There we go. Joe would be so proud of me.
I know, Mr. Keegan, get in here. All right. And then this last one, the Rolodecker was originally meant for Robert Ryan, but he was unavailable. I think we kind of covered that.
Robert Ryan, let's see here. Because that's part of the trivia, I just thought we'd owe it to our listeners just to figure out why that was of note.
Who is he?
Who is he? What's he been in? And no, and he was not hot. I guess for the time period. Let's see here.
I don't know why, but I'm thinking of Ryan Reynolds.
Oh,
it's just the double R.
That's a big difference.
I'll read 3 that I've actually heard of. So The Tall Man, he was in that, and that's from 1955. Let's see here. It looks like a lot of westerns. So Day of the Outlaw, that was in 1959. And let's see. The movie King of Kings. That was a very popular movie when that came out in 1961, and he played John the Baptist. So anyway, there's some of his credits.
Good for him.
All right. So we'll move on to our final thoughts of this episode, and where you kind of think it ranks in our now being part 7 of this list. And I think, like I said earlier, we know what part 8 is going to be. So Kelvin, why don't you give me your final thoughts on Doomsday Machine?
As we started off with initial thoughts, I will mirror to say that I think it is a good episode of the original series, a very enjoyable rewatch, a very classic episode with some great themes. The issue I have with it being included in our Man versus Machine series is what I said earlier about the Planet Killer's appearance and design made it look more like a space-dwelling life form rather than a machine. And I think it could have taken the story in a different direction if it was organic. And I know it's a bit 10C like in that it's destroying the planets. It doesn't know it's doing harm. How are we going to get it stopped? How are we going to communicate? Completely different direction. But they just didn't monopolize on the idea that this was a machine that could have been built, deactivated, a history, a problem to solve. It was just, let's blow it up.
Yeah, and
so
I think
Man versus Machine has been done better elsewhere.
Yeah. I think you see that a little bit with what they said about the writer not being happy with the appearance, and that to your point, because of the way it was depicted on screen, it leaves open all this controversial. Because if it was just a ship, you'd be justified in trying to destroy it, right? But if it's a living, you kind of get into that whole tropey, do we have the right to destroy it?
Yeah, that would have been great.
Mark.
It was stupid that Uhura wasn't in this episode. Clearly, the lines were written for her. I don't know where Nichelle was, but I think it was just more to appease the studios, where they have less of the black lady on television. So that pisses me off right off the bat. But hot take. But aside from that, I did really enjoy the episode overall. Decker, we see again through the motion picture. We have sort of a nod to that with his son being on it. And I think the character itself of Decker is compelling enough and was acting well enough where I actually care to sort of know more about him. And I am intrigued and would love to see his appearance earlier, maybe in Strange New Worlds. I just want to see more of the character. That way it even ups the stakes more when he shows up again in this episode. So, that's how I feel about the episode.
Yeah, I think that's one of the beauty things that we have in Strange New Worlds, are being able to flesh out some of these TOS era characters, even some of the guest stars. That would be kind of cool to see him kind of before his fall from grace. I think my final thoughts mirror my initial thoughts quite a bit. I'll just say, in looking at the other 6 episodes that we've covered in this, The Ultimate Computer, The Ninth Degree, Dead Stop, Project Daedalus, Where Pleasant Fountains Lie, and Bar Association. This being number 7, Doomsday Machine. I'm still saying that of this particular 7, Enterprise's Dead Stop is probably still my favorite episode of these episodes. I love that episode. And there you have it.
What shows are on BQN, you ask? Well, here's a rundown of some podcasts you might be interested in. All Good Things, a Star Trek Universe podcast covering all of Trek, hosted by Amy, Mark, Christos, and Kelvin. Bargain Bin Gamer, a YouTube show hosted by Davey, a self-proclaimed gamer who specializes in reviewing and showcasing affordable video games. If you're lost in the Delta Quadrant, check out The Captain's Couch, a Star Trek Voyager podcast hosted by Jeremiah sitting on Janeway's Ready Room couch. Cinema Z, a film discussion and review podcast showcasing films you probably missed but should definitely check out, hosted by Mark, Matt, and Laz. Beam Aboard the Galaxy Class, a Star Trek Next Generation podcast covering all of TNG, hosted by Amy, Joe, Rhea, and Kevin. History with the Szilagys, a snippet of historical events from around the world, hosted by Chrissie and Jason. For the newest Trek coverage, check out Infinite Diversity, hosted by Chrissie and Thad. Test your Trek knowledge with Treksperts Quiz, a Star Trek quiz show hosted and written by Davey. Union Federation, covering all things Star Trek and the Orville, which we all know is really a Star Trek show, hosted by Kyle, Kevin, Amy, and Haley. Spill the Tea with What's the Tea, Bev? A Trek current events and fan interview show hosted by Christos. And for our Patreon members, we have The Hive Mind, BQN's monthly roundtable discussion with hosts and listeners. It's Green, a cornucopia of topics hosted by Mark, and Amy's Math Moments, a quick look at math moments in Star Trek, hosted by Amy. We know you have a choice of podcasts to choose from, and we thank you for listening to BQN. Assimilate the audio.
So, Kelvin, why don't you tell us a little bit about next week's very special episode of All Good Things?
Oh, is it very special? Well, next week it's my anniversary of being a host on the show. So we are going to continue our Hosts Pick series, and we're going to cover my very, very favorite episode of The Next Generation. That's season 5's Cause and Effect. So I cannot wait to discuss the episode with you all.
Well, I'm very touched that you chose a Beverly episode for your pick.
The forgotten Beverly episode.
It is a forgotten Beverly episode. Trivia out there. Other than we covered the chase for me as a host pick. Have we done Mark and Amy?
Did unification.
Amy did
unification.
Yes.
At the time, it was a little redundant for me because I was picking all of the episodes. Now it might actually work.
Yeah, no, it's just I thought I was going to point out what you just confirmed for me, Kelvin, that we our choices have all been TNG episodes.
Oh yeah.
We would love to hear what you thought of today's episode and hope you'll join our Facebook group, the BQN Collective, to continue our discussion there. You can also reach us at All Good Pod on Blue Sky. Please join the network on Blue Sky and Instagram at BQN Podcasts. We've also partnered with our friends on the Fandom Podcast Network, where you can find us by searching their master feed. So, Kelvin, where can people find you when you're not chasing around starships with a waffle cone?
When I'm not doing that, people can find me in the BQN Collective Facebook group or over on the socials at Kelvin's Timeline. And Mark, where can people find you when you're not sat alone in the observation room looking deranged because there's no half-empty cups of coffee everywhere?
I would be deranged without my coffee. Trust me. I drink coffee as a public service to not kill anyone. You're welcome. So when I'm not doing that, you can also find me in the BQN Collective Facebook group. It's a lot of fun. Listeners, what are you doing if you're not a member of the BQN Collective Facebook group? Really, check out. It's great. So when I'm also on Cinema Z, it's a film discussion and review podcast. And we have a whole lot of fun out there, acting out scenes from our favorite films and drinking and, in general, having a good time. So you should check that out. And I'm also on Blue Sky Social at MW207. And Christos, I'm all ready this time. And Christos, where can people find you when you are not relieving Kelvin of command for being medically unfit by using a hypo spray to knock him out?
Let's see. You can find me also on Facebook in the BQN Collective. You can find me on Instagram, Blue Sky, Threads, but not on Twitter or X.
Please hit the subscribe button on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts from and leave us a star rating and written review. That helps others to find the show. You can also follow the entire network's podcasts with our master feed by searching BQN.
At this time, we would like to thank our associate producers, Mahendran Radhakrishnan and Tim Cooper. Special thanks to Graham Kelly for our opening and closing music. And hey guys, I do the art. Yay! Pat on the back.
If you'd like to help us keep our shows coming to you each week, you can become a patron of the network on Patreon. We will add you to the Hive Mind Facebook group so you can enjoy It's Green, Amy's Math Moments, and other network perks. With a monthly subscription of $5 or more, you can join our meetings on the Hive Mind Roundtable discussion on the second Saturday of each month. Visit patreon.com/BQN to get all the details and watch your messages.
Thank you for listening.
We hope you'll join us
as we search out all good things.